see some showers bubbling up, primarily across the northern half of the UK. Parts of southern Wales into central southern England will largely stay dry, with a lot of sunshine in between. There'll be some longer spells of rain as we head towards the middle part of the week, but still some sunshine in between those and temperatures around the low 20s.
First and foremost, I am a GB News fan, and I was before I was working here. Just love the fact that we're asking the questions that a lot of establishment media won't ask.
With a bit of a twist, we not only want to inform you, but we want to keep you entertained.
It's worth the drive because you get in and the team's all ready and waiting, they're itching to go, and it's a proper little family.
GB News is the People's Channel.
It's the audience that makes the programme sing.
We're giving our viewers and our listeners a voice. I see the thousands of your letters, tweets, emails, you name it, coming in.
Britain is broken. How on earth did we get into this mess? But more importantly, how do we get out of it?
The establishment had their chance. Now we're here to represent you.
It's time for something different. It's time for GB News. I'm very patriotic. I believe in Britain. Our best days lie ahead.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
Join us here on GB News.
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
I'm Andrew Doyle. Join me at 7 o'clock every Sunday night for Free Speech Nation, the show where I tackle the week's biggest stories in politics and current affairs with the help of my two comedian panellists and a variety of special guests.
Free Speech Nation, Sunday nights from 7 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Nightmare commute? Kick it up a gear with me, Patrick Christie's, at drive time, 3 till 6 p.m, Monday to Friday on GB News Radio. You can listen online and on DAB+, on the smart speaker app, and on the GB News app. And if you've got an Alexa, all you have to say is, Alexa, play GB News. We're also on TuneIn and the Radio Player apps. From the school run to rush hour, get revved up with me, Patrick Christie's, on GB News and GB News Radio.
What you get for breakfast is something that, if we do our jobs right, you will wake up to news that you didn't know the night before.
It's a conversation. It's not just me and Eamon.
We want to get to know you, and we want you to get to know us.
From 6, it's Breakfast with Eamon and Isabel.
Monday to Thursdays on GB News,
Britain's news channel.
Westminster is going around in ever-decreasing circles, followed by the media. Britain is broken. How on earth did we get into this mess? But more importantly, how do we get out of it? Join me at 7 p.m, Monday to Thursdays on Farage, here on GB News. We will have open, rational debate. We've got to work out how Britain moves forward from this. Join us here on GB News, the People's Channel. Britain is watching.
Every Sunday from 11, join Michael Portillo.
There will be topical discussion, looking at the week before and the week to come. So kick back and relax at 11 a.m. on Sundays on GB News with me, Michael Portillo. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Hello and welcome. This is Calvin's Common Sense Crusade with me, the Reverend Calvin Robinson, on your TV, online and on your wireless. Today we'll be discussing comments made by a senior member of the Church of England saying Christians are seen as the aggressive voices in court cases dealing with trans issues. Are these Christians belligerent bigots or just expressing views that don't fit the admissible narrative? The charity, Just Like Us, targets 6,000 schools across the country this coming week to educate pupils, some as young as 7, about the LGBTQ+ agenda. The head of education at Christian Concern joins me to discuss this. Plus, former advisor to Donald Trump, Dr. Sebastian Gorka, joins me live in the studio for an update on all things USA. And in the duel, my panellists will be discussing new research which reveals right-wing women are objectively more attractive than women with left-wing views. Why would this be? Emma, in a few seconds, your initial take?
I can't wink at the camera. Well, no, I think there are many beautiful women on the left. However, I thought what was very interesting about this research is that the AI picked up on the fact that left-wing women's faces were more contemptuous.
Figures. And Shara?
Well, I guess there are two kinds of people, those who think there are two kinds of people and those who don't, and I'm kind of in the latter category. But insofar as there is some rhyme and reason to this study, I think there is something to be said for it. And in a nutshell, I think left-wing politics at the moment has become very fractious. There is a tendency to be illiberal, and I think that could affect, essentially, the facial appearance, the comportment, if you like, of politics in the left.
But before all of that, it's the news with Rory Smith.
Thank you very much, Calvin. We're going to start with some breaking news. And Russian mercenary boss has ordered his fighters to turn back from Moscow to avoid bloodshed. Yevgeny Prigozhin's forces were on their way to Moscow on what he called a march for justice to remove Russian commanders he blamed for mishandling the war in Ukraine. Well, now Prigozhin has told troops to turn around and return to their bases. It's a major de-escalation of what had become a serious challenge to President Vladimir Putin's grip on power. Ukraine's President Volodymyr Zelensky says the rebellion exposed complete chaos in the country. Well, in other news this evening, safety investigators have begun interviewing those who were on board the ship which lost contact with the Titan submersible. If you're watching on television, you're now looking at live pictures of St John's Harbour. That's where the Polar Price arrived earlier today. The Transportation Safety Board of Canada is currently collecting information from the vessel's voyage data recorder. 5 people were killed in the incident. A major water company is blaming more people working from home after the COVID pandemic for a new hosepipe ban. South East Water, which supplies more than 2 million homes and businesses, will impose the first hosepipe ban of the summer from Monday, affecting households across Kent and Sussex. Well, the company's chief executive also blamed low rainfall, as well as a recent spell of hot weather, leading to a spike in demand for drinking water. The Prime Minister has paid tribute to the phenomenal precision and professionalism of British troops as events are held across the UK to mark Armed Forces Day. King Charles has also thanked personnel for the immense and dedicated contribution of the British military, both at home and overseas. He drew on his own time in the military, saying he recognised the deep pride service personnel take in their duty. Well, people in Manchester told us what today means to them.
One of these things that should be recognised. The army should be recognised. The veterans should be recognised. There's, you go to America and they're recognised. Here, they're sort of like brushed under the carpet, and it's all wrong.
It's show my support for the veterans, the injured veterans, and the cadets who hopefully, and they're our future, all being well.
Show your respects like in that, there's a lot of colleagues and that who aren't here today, who would like to be here, but for the guys who are serving now and the girls. So yeah, we still need our armed forces, and just for be part of that, it's something we're proud of.
This is GB News. We'll bring you more as it happens now, though. Back to Calvin.
The British and Commonwealth armies that fought the Second World War were made up of over 10 million soldiers from Britain, Australia, Canada, India, New Zealand, South Africa, and the many other components of the British Empire. Royal Indian Army Service Corps was part of the British Expeditionary Force in a 1940 campaign which ended in the evacuation of Dunkirk. On the 10th of October 1939, an aircraft of No. 10 Squadron Royal Australian Air Force, based in England, became the first Commonwealth Air Force unit to go into action when it undertook a mission to Tunisia. The first Canadian convoy of 15 ships bearing war goods departed Halifax just 6 days after the nation declared war, with 2 destroyers, HMCS St Laurent and HMCS Seguin. Toward the end of World War II, recruits were drawn from all over the British West Indies. These troops made up the Caribbean Regiment. The East African campaign consisted of the British Middle East Command with troops from the United Kingdom, South Africa, British India, Ugandan Protectorate, Kenya, Somaliland, West Africa, Northern and Southern Rhodesia, Sudan and Nyasaland. They mainly fought against Italy and Italian East Africa. These snippets are taken from a history lesson I developed for Black History Month. Personally, I don't believe in a Black History Month because Black history is British history. But I understand as a former educator that schools are feeling the pressure to do something. And it's not just Black History Month, but the topic of Black Lives Matter, and at this time of year, the anniversary of Windrush. Schools are going to be teaching something, so I figured why not give them resources that aren't infested with critical race theory, the divisive rhetoric which propagates the idea that all black kids are victims held back by a racist society and that all white kids are oppressors guilty of white privilege. With these resources, provided free via Don't Divide Us, I wanted to demonstrate that there is a way to discuss the success of integration and even diversity without obsessing about skin colour. We can talk about Sikh infantrymen, troops in the East Africa Division who marched in Burma, Jamaican pilots in the RAF, and Australian soldiers. If we shift the focus to the Commonwealth of Nations, we can focus on the things that unite us rather than the things that divide us. The Commonwealth is a political association of 54 member states, nearly all former territories of the British Empire. It is a voluntary union in which member states choose to keep close ties with Britain, to fight alongside us, to trade with us, and more importantly, to build a community with us. So as the anniversary of Windrush comes up and the grievance peddlers in the mainstream media try hard to divide us, remember we are stronger together and there is more we have in common than separates us. And what better day to remember the contributions of the whole Commonwealth family than on Armed Forces Day. Taking it on face value, it seems the scientists have proven that conservative women are better looking than lefty women. An artificial intelligence study by researchers from Denmark and Sweden has launched to test if this new AI phenomenon could determine a person's political views just by looking at their face. Impressively and scarily, the technology was correct for 61% of women and 65% of men. The algorithm found a notable link between conventional attractiveness in women and conservative opinions and values. Which all leads me to this week's duel. Are right-wing women more beautiful than left-wing women? And if so, why? Joining me now is my sidekick and UK director of the Common Sense Society, Emma Webb, and my nemesis for this week is the former deputy leader of the Green Party, Dr. Sharar Ali. Dr. Ali, I'm going to start with you. Why is left-wing politics so ugly?
Well, I think, first of all, it's important to point out, I mean, beauty's in the eye of the beholder. This is quite a reductive way of treating ugliness or beauty. Personally, I would even evaluate somebody's beauty as how they form their beliefs, how they express themselves, and their character, actually what they think and what they say, is very important to me. But insofar as there may be a kernel of truth in this, and I do think there is something to the study and science of faces. I mean, obviously we read people's emotions. There could be more to it in terms of physiology, possibly even genetics. But I think insofar as there's something in this, I do believe that, particularly in a Western liberal democracy, where people have their basic needs met, there's something going on in politics at the moment. In the left in particular, it's becoming increasingly authoritarian. And if we just define very quickly what we mean by left and right politics, I would say traditionally, although this isn't universally the case, right-leaning politics tends to be libertarian in inspiration. So we're familiar with the idea live and let live. In fact, both camps try and lay claim to that. They say live and let live. But I don't think truly that the left actually believes that any longer. A great portion of left politics now is obsessed with getting people to live in a particular way, in the way that they want. If you think about be kind, that's actually passive aggressive. And insofar as it's an injunction, not just to live as you like, but to live as we tell you to, and not to depart from a particular norm which we may potentially want. When I say we, right? I don't necessarily agree with this. I'm taking the Green Party to court over some of it. Insofar as there is an injunction to actually impose a way of living, I think that can result in a disturbance in the mind, which reveals itself in the face. So in that sense, there could be something to this.
OK. Emma, where I disagree with Shahar is that he said beauty is in the eye of the beholder. I think beauty is objective, and I think this study proves that.
Well, I do agree that beauty is objective. Obviously, there are some things that are... That doesn't mean that there's, not variation in what people find beautiful, but I do believe in a kind of transcendent, objective understanding of beauty. What I think was so interesting about this study, because, of course, we know that, people's internal existences, their mental health, as one example, is something that, can wear on your face. And this study, what was so interesting about this is that lots of other studies have found, or at least according to the reports, there have been other studies that have found that there are that people on the left, particularly young women under 30 on the left, have worse mental health. And that's something that could potentially show in your appearance. And this AI also identified that women on the left were identified by the AI as looking more contemptuous. So it's things to do with whether or not you have a sort of a resting smile face like Emily Carver, or a resting miserable face like mine. So probably the AI would have identified me as being on the left. But I think it's interesting because, whilst I do think, and there are lots of many beautiful women on the left, I can think of many who are on this channel regularly, people like Amy Nicole, who I think is very beautiful, and she's on the left. So I don't think that we can draw the conclusion that women on the left are not attractive.
I think it's just saying that women who are attractive tend to be right-wing.
Yeah.
Not that women on the left can't be attractive.
Yeah, and I think, there are other aspects to this as well. I think that particularly on the far left, the kind of Antifa left, you do see people trying to sort of augment their appearances in various ways that would perhaps detract from natural beauty, possibly. So maybe there's something in that as well. But I do think it's interesting that there could be maybe a correlation between struggles with mental health and the way that you appear, or at least the way that you are identified as appearing by AI.
Yeah. Sharad, there's something in that liberal women are statistically unhappiest and have the most mental health issues. Is it just that liberalism is a mental health issue?
I think we've got to be very careful generally about, some of the generalisations we've been making, and we distinguish between correlation. Notably, in that study, they did do the socioeconomic control.
Yeah.
So I would have been concerned at the outset, well, hang on, there are a whole set of life circumstances which people who might traditionally want to vote Conservative, for example, find themselves in a happier circumstance in the first place. So after correcting for that, to find that, I just do want to say something for the left, since I still take myself to be broadly in that camp politically. I think there are some things which I would regard as inadequate responses to injustice. And I think insofar as the left agitates and rails against injustice, that will also cause a kind of disturbance, which may reveal itself in contortion, anger, justified anger, I think, is something that you may be more likely to find. It's the self-righteousness which I think is problematic. It's the idea that there are different conceptions of the good. I think in a habitable political secular space, I think it's incredibly important that we, true liberalism is respect people's capacity and will voluntarily to adopt different forms of life without necessarily policing them too much. And I think that, in that sense, left politics are becoming increasingly oppressive in a way which they themselves don't. The ones who do this, who perpetrate this, they don't realise it. It's that obsessiveness. It's the morally proselytising overdrive, which I think we can cause this.
Self-righteousness without any self-awareness. Emma, on a final question here, I mean, this doesn't just involve women, it's also men. Men with happier faces tend to be right-wing too. But the link here in these reports was that Perhaps it's down to the mainstream media, which it found to be mostly left-leaning too. Could it be that the harmful narratives and the harmful advice being perpetrated by the left-wing media is what's causing these women on the left to be unhappy?
Well, it's interesting because you hear a lot about climate anxiety, people having breakdowns because they're so anxious that the world is ending. They feel the weight of the world is on their shoulders because only they can save it from climate disaster or from systemic oppression. Yeah. People who have been led to believe that society is against them and that they're oppressed. And of course, if you have a crisis of values, a crisis of meaning, you have the transience and instability in your life, and perhaps even mental health issues that come along with that. Of course, that is going to have some kind of consequence for your appearance. And now I don't trust AI's ability to identify any form of transcendent beauty, but I do think it's interesting that it was able, with a almost 60% accuracy, 61%
61
accuracy,
for women, 65 for men.
that it was able to pick up on those differences, which suggests that maybe our ideas really do have some kind of effect on, well, on the way that we live our lives, and the way that we live our lives obviously has an effect on the way that we look.
I'm with you. It goes back to the science of physiognomy, doesn't it? So it's interesting. That was Emma Webb and former deputy leader of the Green Party, Dr. Sharar Ali. More from them later. Plenty more to come on my Common Sense Crusade. And next, we will be discussing comments from a senior Anglican claiming Christians are seen as aggressive in court cases surrounding transgender issues. I'm joined by former Anglican bishop and chaplain to Her Majesty Queen Elizabeth II, Gavin Ashenden, to delve into this. Plus, an LGBT charity is set to put their agenda to kids as young as 7 in 6,000 schools around the country. And former advisor to Donald Trump, Dr. Sebastian Gorka, joins me live in the studio for an update on all things USA. Back with you in 3.
First and foremost, I am a GB News fan, and I was before I was working here. Just love the fact that we're asking the questions that a lot of establishment media won't ask.
With a bit of a twist, we not only want to inform you, but we want to keep you entertained.
It's worth the drive because you get in and the team's all ready and waiting, they're itching to go, and it's a proper little family.
GB News is the people's channel.
It's the audience that makes the programme sing.
We're giving our viewers and our listeners a voice. I see the thousands of your letters, tweets, emails, you name it, coming in.
Britain is broken. How on earth did we get into this mess? But more importantly, how do we get out of it?
The establishment had their chance. Now we're here to represent you.
It's time for something different. It's time for GB News. I'm very patriotic. I believe in Britain. Our best days lie ahead.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
Join us here on GB News.
The people's channel.
Britain's news channel.
I'm Andrew Doyle. Join me at 7 o'clock every Sunday night for Free Speech Nation, the show where I tackle the week's biggest stories in politics and current affairs with the help of my 2 comedian panellists and a variety of special guests.
Free Speech Nation, Sunday nights from 7 on GB News, the people's channel, Britain's news channel.
Nightmare commute. Kick it up a gear with me, Patrick Christie's, at drive time, 3 till 6 p.m, Monday to Friday on GB News Radio. You can listen online and on DAB+, on the smart speaker app, and on the GB News app. And if you've got an Alexa, all you have to say is, Alexa, play GB News. We're also on TuneIn and the Radio Player apps. From the school run to rush hour, get revved up with me, Patrick Christie's, on GB News and GB News Radio.
What you get for breakfast is something that, if we do our jobs right, you will wake up to news that you didn't know the night before.
It's a conversation. It's not just me and Eamon.
We want to get to know you, and we want you to get to know us.
From 6, it's Breakfast with Eamon and Isabel.
Monday to Thursdays on GB News.
Britain's news channel.
Westminster is going around in ever-decreasing circles, followed by the media. Britain is broken. How on earth did we get into this mess? But more importantly, how do we get out of it? Join me at 7 p.m, Mondays to Thursdays on Farage, here on GB News. We will have open, rational debate. We've got to work out how Britain moves forward from this. Join us here on GB News, the people's channel. Britain is watching.
Every Sunday from 11, join Michael Portillo.
There will be topical discussion, looking at the week before and the week to come. So kick back and relax at 11 a.m. on Sundays on GB News with me, Michael Portillo. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Radio.
Welcome back to the Common Sense Crusade with me, the Reverend Calvin Robinson, on your TV, online and on your wireless. A senior advisor in the Church of England has argued that Christian voices within court cases surrounding transgender issues are seen as aggressive to those with Christian beliefs are associated with such aggression. Director of Faith and Public Life, Reverend Dr. Malcolm Brown, made the remarks following the successful appeal of a teaching assistant who was sacked from her job for expressing unfavourable views on the teaching of LGBTQ+ education in primary schools. The Reverend Brown argued that debates between Christian viewpoints and those who take offence with such stances are polarised and devoid of nuance, and questioned the characterisation of danger to freedom of religious expression peddled by some campaign groups. Joining me now to discuss this is the former Anglican bishop and chaplain to Queen Elizabeth II, Dr. Gavin Ashenden. Is Reverend Brown right? And thank you for joining us tonight, by the way.
It's very good to be here again. Thank you. Well, he's factually correct in telling us that the judiciary don't like Christians standing up for themselves when they are campaigning against being unfairly dismissed for their Christian views and their freedom of conscience. He's entirely wrong to be the message carrier from the judiciary to the church and the church to the world. What he should be doing is saying to the judiciary, Christians are entitled to freedom of conscience, they're entitled to freedom of belief. The three most recent figures, to give you an idea of the context, was Christy Higgs, who started a petition saying we don't want compulsory sex education in primary schools. Joshua Sutcliffe, who was a maths teacher, who said, well done, girls, and there happened to be someone transitioning in the back, and he was sacked with his career gone forever. Bernard Randall, a school chaplain, who said you don't have to believe what anybody teaches you. These are not fundamentalists. These are moderate, conscientious people who ought to be defended by any reasonable person, and particularly by Dr. Brown.
But is this not the issue, Dr. Ashenden, in that religious views are seen as problematic now, no matter how fundamental they might be?
Well, we're in a clash of civilizations, and the problem is that the church, certainly the Church of England, hasn't yet realized that the people, the predominant culture is anti-Christian and determined to effectively silence Christians and Christian conscience. I thought Emma Webb was quite right when she said the Church of England has become a woke wellness cult. And a woke wellness cult it's a great phrase. They are woke, they're all about wellness, and they're becoming a cult. And the betrayal of Christians throughout the country that the Church of England has perpetrated by having its senior advisor in political affairs bring back this message is profound and treacherous, and it must be called out as such. It's deeply anti-Christian, and they should be very ashamed of themselves.
Emma Webb is often right, but on this point I do want to put out an apology, because I've had a couple of priests get in touch since that segment that you mentioned, and one of them was Emma's priest himself, actually, and they said, look, you guys have dismissed the entirety of the Church of England as a wellness cult, and it's the leadership that is the problem. It's the leadership that's captured. There are many, many, many good clergymen on the ground doing God's work, and I think that's right to point out. So I'll take that challenge and I give that apology. But what is the solution to this? If Christian views are painted as problematic, if the culture around us is anti-Christian, and anything that's seen as disagreement is seen as aggression, how do we get to the nuance of the conversation?
The conversation is always nuanced from the church's point of view. I've never heard anybody within Christian circles not arrive at their conclusion after a great deal of time and trouble and conversation. We're decades beyond homophobia now. Nobody growing up in this culture can have done anything else but think about it. The solution? Well, there are two. First of all, the clergy that have asked you to recognize that there are some good people in the institution, they're right, but they're not entitled to hold you to account until they themselves take on the institution. Why are we not hearing their voices raised in protest? They become quiescent. And for as long as they're quiescent, you're perfectly entitled to dismiss the Church of England as an institution. Other people call it institutionally racist. Nobody complains about that apart from you and me. Why should you and I not call them a woke wellness cult and then invite them to change our views by their behavior? The other solution would be for ordinary free-thinking people in this country who have been institutionalized and brainwashed by the media to begin to think for themselves and realize that the whole LGBTQ alphabet people thing is actually a con, not in the sense that there aren't perfectly nice people trying to make their way in a difficult world. Of course they are. They can do what they like, think what they like, act as they like, unless they're Christians, in which case they follow Christ. But the idea that that this is a coherent movement where identifying with your sexual desires, your sexual identity, is a good thing for human beings is a serious mistake. And most people, when they sit down and think about it, no. If you listen, for example, to Douglas Murray, he'll tell you that the L and the G and the B and the T and the Q and the A have nothing whatsoever to do with each other ideologically. This is a composite movement that happens to have in its sights that Christianity as its number one enemy. So the answer, I think, is for Christians to articulate their position in as nuanced and a compassionate way as possible, but to do it with some courage. At the moment, the courage is lacking.
Very good, thank you. I've got a bone to pick with you another time, Dr. Gavin Ashenden. We're having a bit of an online debate, and I think we need to take it public, this whole Anglican versus Roman Catholic thing that's spewing up at the moment. But thank you so much for your time this evening. That is Catholic layman, Dr. Gavin Ashenden. I want to bring my panel in on this. I've still got with me my sidekick, UK Director of the Common Sense Society, Emma Webb. She stole my name there. And my nemesis, the former Deputy Leader of the Green Party, Dr. Shahrar Ali. Now, is the problem here, I'll go to Emma first, is the problem here that Christian views are just too bigoted for modern day?
Well, to go briefly back to what you were saying about the woke wellness cult, I think obviously the problem is the leadership of the Church of England. Of course, there are good priests and there are people who are trying to do their best in an institution that's gone completely off the rails. But the reality is that the leadership is completely rotten. And I think that this story is a perfect example of that, because this statement is almost spineless in the way that it throws under the bus those Christians who are holding to their consciences. And yes, they might not be the woolly kind of Anglicanism of the leadership of the Church of England, but they're good, as Gavin Ashenden said, good, conscientious Christians. And so I think that, these are not people who are radical. These are not extreme Christian views. This is not the FLDS, the fundamentalist Christians. These are normal Christians holding to the gospel, and they are coming into conflict with this ideology, this relatively new ideology, and rather than standing up for them, the leadership of the Church of England is trying to disassociate itself from them, to say these are not the only Christian views that there are, instead of standing up for those Christians' right to hold what, until very recently, were just simply mainstream views and are by absolutely no means bigoted.
Shahrar, a lot of this came about because Mrs. Higgs said that children were being brainwashed and they were being taught confusing, harmful gender identity from books. Now, you've got not related, but a similar case going on with the party. I want to give you the opportunity to talk about why you're suing the party and bring that into the conversation.
Well, there is some similarity in these cases, and I think what's of interest to me is that we have a teaching assistant standing up for her right to express her religious views and religious expression. I think that differs potentially quite fundamentally from a case such as my own, and even Maya Forster, who has now provided us with the law at appeal, which is that gender-critical belief, the idea that sex is immutable, is worthy of respect in a democratic society. Yeah. Are we able to say the same thing about, I think that is the question, religious belief? I think, first of all, it's worth exploring that there is no univocal account of any of the great religious traditions, as far as I'm concerned. And so there will be differences in the way that's expressed, and there may arguably be a time and a place to express those things. My case, I think, is trying to adopt the line that not only is the idea that sex is immutable worthy of respect in a democratic society, it's also worthy of respect in a political party. And so I have faced horrific, actually, as you'll see in a couple of months' time at trial, discrimination on the basis of actually, I think, doing a good job as a party spokesperson, promulgating statements which are consistent with the immutability of sex, and I think is held by everybody. I don't know what makes me your nemesis, by the way. We don't know each other that well, but if it's the idea that we adhere to rational, common sense belief, then I'm not your nemesis. So I think what's very interesting about the religious expression then is that I do think there are greater opportunities for Flashpoint. And Dr. Ashenden as well, he said that religious expression is reasonable. And I think it's for the courts and for society to some extent to decide when and if it is reasonable. Within teaching profession, for example, you may have to, by dint of being an employee, have to sign up to teaching curriculum. And insofar as that curriculum has been well developed, has had plenty of input and is robust, then it wouldn't necessarily be appropriate for somebody on the basis of their religious belief to say, I don't wish to teach that. Because if it's within the bounds, and there were some quite provocative things that Dr. Ashenden said, and as a member of the Green Party, I don't agree with his evaluation, although there is some incoherence about how different people's ways of being are grouped together in that way. Yeah. I did detect, a certain amount of antipathy towards those ways of being. I think what we need to move to is a properly liberal society in which we respect different conceptions of the good life. I think the problem arises, and it particularly arises within an educator. We can't have it both ways, because if we're going to object to certain things being taught, say, prematurely in an age-inappropriate way, the same could follow for our educators teaching something which we've all agreed is robust and coherent, refusing to teach because they think it doesn't conform to their own individual belief. And I think there are times and places for religious expression. Yeah. And as an employee, I think the main hat you're wearing is a professional of that profession. So I do think it's very interesting. I think if the courts have judged that she was within her rights to express that, I think on a case-by-case basis, that's actually important. So there's a high threshold on her right to express herself.
Well, you are a true liberal, and the main similarity I see between Mrs. Hicks's case and your case is that you both have so-called liberal progressives showing that they are actually intolerant and illiberal of opinions different to their own. That was Emma Webb and former Deputy Leader of the Green Party, Dr. Shura Ali. Plenty more to come this evening on my Common Sense Crusade. Next, we'll be joined by the Head of Education at Christian Concern to discuss the role of LGBTQ+ education programmes in up to 6,000 schools, with children as young as 7 years old. Plus, stick around for your updates on the US with former advisor to Donald Trump, Dr. Sebastian Gorka, who joins me live in the studio. Back in just a moment.
Like all families, we have arguments every now and then, but actually we agree on what the mission of GB News is, and that's the most fundamentally important thing.
GB News provides the kind of platform that lets all voices be heard.
We don't hold back. We're free to say what we really think.
Just because some people who live in a tiny little Westminster bubble think that their particular story is important, that's not the most important story for me.
And often they will be difficult stories that you won't find on the establishment media.
Because what people think in the north of England may be very different to what they're thinking in the home counties.
We're going to carry on telling the world what life is really like for households up and down the UK.
We love to be in your car, in your kitchen as you're having your breakfast. Whatever you're doing, you are part of the show. If it matters to you, it matters to us.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
We're proud to be GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Patrick Christie's, Monday to Friday, 3 till 6. We tackle the day's news agenda like you've never seen before. It's high tempo, high octane, the most controversial topics, and the best guests. You will not be able to take your eyes and ears off it. I'm not afraid to ask the questions that you really want answered. 3 till 6 p.m, Monday to Friday on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Camilla Tominey, on Sunday mornings from 9:30, taking the politicians to task and breaking out of SW1 to see how their decisions are affecting you across the UK. Bursting the Westminster bubble every Sunday morning, only on GB News, the People's Channel. Britain's watching.
Join us every night on GB News at 11 p.m. for Headliners, which is 3 top comedians going through the next day's news stories, which is exactly what you need, because when the establishment has gone crazy, you need some craziness to make sense of it. So join us 11 p.m. every night on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Hi, I'm Dan Wootton. You can watch me live on GB News Monday to Thursday from 9 p.m. And did you know that you can also watch and listen live on our website, gbnews.com. You'll always be up to date on the latest breaking news, as well as enjoying the best stories, opinions, and shows. You can even join the debate under our live player as you're watching. So head straight to gbnews.com on TV, radio, and online. GB News, Britain's news channel.
So Jubes and Kerr, we tackle the issues of the day with real, robust debate, both sides of the fence, battling it out with me in the middle with my forthright opinions and views. And often really interesting things happen because you start with a position and then by the end of the debate you find actually, I might not have thought about that one.
What we need in this country is 2 new political parties.
You should maybe think about doing a 2024 calendar. I'm Michelle Dewberry and I'm keeping you company right through until 7 o'clock this evening.
GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's watching.
Nepotism is dying.
Welcome back to the Common Sense Crusade with me, the Reverend Calvin Robinson, on your TV, online, and on your wireless. Pronouns, rainbow flags, and gender identity are on the agenda for Schools Diversity Week from Monday. Around 6,000 schools across the UK have signed up for the event run by the LGBT plus charity Just Like Us to educate Key Stage 2 children as young as 7, reportedly encouraging them to wave rainbow flags and don pronoun badges proclaiming whether they identify as male, female, or non-binary. Concerns have been raised by some about the idea of indoctrinating children with gender ideology without the knowledge or consent of their parents. One such person is my next guest, Steve Bigu, the Head of Education at Christian Concern. Steve, thank you for joining us again. What are your primary concerns about this curriculum that's been pushed into Key Stage 2?
Yeah, well, Just Like Us are one of scores of organisations that are pouring their resources into schools up and down the country, and yes, even primary schools. One of the things that's so fascinating about the scale of all of this is that speed at which this has started to come into schools and the breadth and the scope of the curriculum that the LGBT and gender ideology is being integrated with. So 6,000 schools, Just Like Us, are saying that they're working with to provide diversity weeks next week. I mean, I don't think it should be called a diversity week. It should really be called Gender Ideology Orthodoxy Week. Really, the way in which they enforce and encourage and direct the teachers and therefore the children to wear badges, to think about pronouns in English lessons in Key Stage 2, to study all sorts of queer role models and to see examples of queer theory, essentially, and trying to, it's a kind of a grooming thing, I see it as, is to kind of gently persuade them in this direction from a young age so that they're ready to embrace all the LGBT ideology at the first moment they get an opportunity to.
Well, I've had a look at this curriculum and they've managed to squeeze the LGBTQ plus stuff into every subject. So I used to teach computer science. I had a look at the computer science stuff. I'm like, how on earth are they going to teach about LGBTQ plus in computing, where we're teaching programs and algorithms? But they found a way, and it's in everything. Steve, my concern is that in subjects like RE, they're teaching lessons on gay Muslims, bisexual Jews, and non-binary lesbian Christians, all of which are what those faiths would call abhorrent or against the order of God, but they're teaching them as if they're orthodoxy within those faiths. Now, that's manipulating faith, is it not?
It's exactly that, and I couldn't agree more that it is a manipulation and it's a misleading of children. And Just Like Us, the examples that I've seen are specifically to target faith-based families, specifically to target faith schools, because in their own research that they highlight themselves, they see that it is a barrier having faith to respond and embrace the LGBT and gender ideology. So therefore, they need to work harder to make sure that children and families from those kinds of groups, from those kinds of schools, are better educated in this kind of way. And so there is a consistent misleading of children from the things that I've seen to encourage them to embrace multiple genders, to embrace multiple possibilities of a whole variety of forms of sexuality, and persuading them by having role models who are Jewish, who are Muslim, who are Christian, who are from a liberal end of those religious faiths, having those guys, young, 18, attractive, persuading these children, do you know what, you can embrace this, you can embrace these these ideas. You can embrace the possibility that you might have been born in the wrong body. And just like us, we'll be signposting children and young people to those religious organisations, which most of those organisations are very much at a certain end of the spectrum, not aligning with the traditional beliefs that Christians would have, Muslims have had, Jews would have, those from a traditional Abrahamic faith, that says that God creates people male and female and that heterosexual marriage is the way in which sexual expression should happen.
Yeah, Steve, they're indoctrinating children, they're grooming them to replace their faith with the new faith of woke. I think it's disgusting, but I'm thankful that you are standing up against it. Anything I can do to support you, let me know. That is Steve Bigu, Head of Education at Christian Concern. Thank you for your time today. I want to briefly bring my panel in. Emma, this is just toxic.
Completely. I mean, these are totally contested ideas. It's ideology. This is critical pedagogy. They are essentially, and I don't mean this organisation specifically, I think we're seeing many, many examples of this, indoctrinating children into a particular worldview. This is not what education is for. This is not teaching children their ABCs and the basics and teaching them to think for themselves. This is teaching them to think in a particular way, and that is indoctrination.
I'm with you. Shara, should 7-year-olds be learning about gender pronouns and putting badges to say they're non-binary, waving rainbow flags?
I think there are some preconditions that have to be met before anything like that happens, which are not happening. There was a great report, actually, just a couple of months, launched, Policy Exchange, Asleep at the Wheel, which did an assessment of the fact that increasingly we've got non-government organisations, charities so-called, coming into our schools. That reduces quality. Even the Green Party's own education policy makes it very clear that it should be local authorities assessing quality. That's not happening. The fact that you've got a subset of schools doing this, that should raise some alarm bells about quality. Secondly, parental consent. Really important, vital, also part of Green Party education policy. They should be front and centre of what's going on in the schools. The fact that you have some of these syllabuses secret.
Yes.
Alarm bells.
Schools.
So, you know, big discussion to be had about the appropriateness, age appropriateness when these come in. I'm not a great fan of queer theory as such. I think that's a highly contested theory. It shouldn't be promulgated. It is a political promulgation if it's presented as fact.
Right. And schools should be working with parents, not against parents. Thank you both. That was Emma Webb and former Deputy Leader of the Green Party, Shara Ali. I want to look at what you guys have been saying. So before we take a final break, let's have a look at what you've been sending in about today's topics. Anna says, what brilliant and well-expressed views Dr. Ali has on attractiveness. He should write a book on the subject. I'd definitely buy it. Your words about the Commonwealth brought a tear to my eye. God bless you all at GB News. Oh, God bless you too, Anna. Thank you for that. Steve says, Emma Webb versus Angela Rayner. Enough said. Survey is correct. Coming up in the final part of my Common Sense Crusade this week, we'll get the latest news and drama and insight from the United States of America with a man who knows more about it than most. In just a moment, I'm joined by former advisor to Donald Trump, Dr. Sebastian Gorka. Back with you in 3.
I joined GB News because I was sick and tired of not hearing my views being represented, not just mine, but so many people that I knew and spoke to.
I just couldn't get my voice out there. I couldn't say anything. I couldn't do anything. Whatever the narrative was, I kind of had to follow it.
GB News is there to provide a voice for those who have been ignored by the establishment media. We think different things, we've got a different style.
GB News is here to be optimistic and positive about the future.
It's real kind of dynamic and flowing, with the audience very much at the heart of it, like a big family.
Here at GB News, we talk about the things that matter to you.
Hearing the voices from right across our towns and cities, especially our towns.
All sides of the argument represented with a heavy dose of opinion.
We're on a mission here to make a difference.
And the GB News family really is here for you, and whatever time of day you can watch or listen.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
We're proud to be GB News.
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
Monday to Thursday, 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. Join me, Dan Wootton. I'll bring you the sharpest takes and hottest debates. Do you not believe in prisons?
I don't believe in prisons.
I'm completely stunned. I guarantee you there'll be no spin, no bias, no censorship.
I actually was personally quite offended by it.
And no reason to go to bed.
So I guess they've always been quite woke.
That's Dan Wootton tonight on TV, radio and online. Monday to Thursday from 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. on GB News. The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
You've probably seen politicians interviewed 1,000 times, but we do it differently. We find out who they really are, we don't shout, we chat, and hopefully we bring a bit of light, not just heat.
Did you know Kate Moss?
Apparently.
Do you have a pair of jeans or a pair of jeans?
No, of course I don't. What would I do with them?
My friends are like, oh my God, what's she doing now?
Join me every Sunday at 6 for Gloria Meets, only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Weeknights on GB News from 6 p.m. You'll always get drama.
Please stop, Michelle.
I know, yeah.
Please stop.
Should I just shut up?
Romance.
You like me, I like you. There you go.
There you are. Well, don't tell anybody.
Adventure.
Etc.
That's the whole point.
And action.
Sergeant, the big read my superstar panel that are already at it. They're fighting. It's going to be quite a show.
Only on GB News. Britain's watching.
In a world of dull and predictable radio and TV shows.
Oh, hi. On Mark Dolan tonight, we've got big guests. We drill into the big stories of the day. The show adds up to a brilliant listening and viewing experience. Mark Dolan Tonight is the most entertaining current affairs show ever, and that's a fact. That's Mark Dolan Tonight, Friday, Saturday and Sunday from 9. Only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
I took to Twitter and asked you, our viewers, with former President Donald Trump on trial and former Prime Minister Boris Johnson having his parliamentary estate pass revoked for life, is this a sign of democracy under threat? Are so-called liberals persecuting their political opponents in kangaroo courts? And the results are in, with 23.8% of you saying no, they got what was coming, and 74.3% of you agreeing with me that democracy itself is at risk. 1.9% of you said something else. Thank you so much for sending in your views. Now, former President Donald Trump's charges over alleged retention of classified documents may have hit another curveball this week, after prosecutors in the case are reportedly attempting to delay the start of his trial until December. The special counsel claim the original August date won't provide sufficient time for effective preparation. After a dramatic few months and years in the US politics, let's get the latest from across the pond from former advisor to Donald Trump, Dr. Sebastian Gorka, who joins me now in the studio to discuss all of this, and his book, The War for America's Soul. Thank you very much for the copy, by the way.
Thank you, Reverend. Great to see you.
It's great to see you too. It's good to see you in person.
In person for once, yes.
So, I mean, what's going on over there? This is just madness. It looks to me from the outside like an attempted dictatorship, trying to prosecute and persecute political opponents.
Well, let's put it into context. This is something that's been happening for 7 years, whether it was the first Mueller probe, the first impeachment, the second impeachment, then the raid on the presidential residence. Mar-a-Lago is guarded 24/7 by Secret Service because he's a former president. And then the FBI go in with guns to search his premises, go through his wife's wardrobe, and then they charge him and arrest him on what? People need to understand. Every president, Jimmy Carter, who's still around, every president maintains the highest level of security clearance till the day they die, whether they've left the office or not. And the idea that in scores of boxes they found 37 documents that were still classified, so what? It's not a crime. He wasn't giving them to anybody. We know what this is. This is to prevent him running. Why? Because he is the leader of the opposition. He is more popular than ever. Biden is clearly mentally challenged, is in its dotage, and they don't have the cover of COVID to mail out 81 million ballots as they did last time. So how are you going to win with a senile old individual in the White House, no COVID cover for mail-out ballots? Well, let's put the leader of the opposition in prison.
Is Donald Trump the first and only politician to ever take his work home with him?
to a residence that is protected by armed federal agents 24 hours a day. Oh, by the way, Bill Clinton did the same. It's called the sock drawer case, where he took tapes of his meetings in the White House, took them to his residence, and kept them in the sock drawer. They were found there. There was a federal big case about it, and the judge said it's up to a president to decide which documents remain his and which go to the archive. The president decides. So how are we prosecuting him exactly? Well, we're making law up as we go along.
Well, it seems they haven't quite got it prepared yet because they want to push the date back to December.
Yes.
Is there not enough evidence?
Well, it doesn't matter whether there's evidence or not. We know what the real reason is. This is to prevent him from running. Let's be clear. This is the only president in history who received more votes on his second election and then lost. Isn't that interesting? 10 million more votes in 2020 than 2016, yet he lost. They know he's a force of nature. When he was indicted in Manhattan for this spurious sexual assault case, he actually became more popular in the polls because people just saw through this tissue of lies. Their hatred, their vituperation knows no limits, and it has become a mission to put him behind bars.
Well, Seb, let's talk about the other fellow. Because as a Brit looking out there to what's going on in the States, I see a chap who this week has been singing the Indian national anthem, holding his hand to his heart as if it was his own national anthem. I see him saying, "God save the Queen," at the end of a speech in Connecticut, was it?
God save the Queen at a gun control speech in Connecticut.
Indeed. Like, so what's going on there? Is he compos mentis?
Well, don't ask me. Look at the history. This is an individual who, before he became president, had 2 brain aneurysms. He's been in politics for 49 years, and this is an individual who on the campaign stage, and if you don't believe me, please, the viewers, go online, look up the video. On a campaign stage event, he mixed up, standing next to him, he mixed up his wife with his sister. I've never done that. And if you're the man who, within 20 feet of you every day, is the nuclear football who can launch Armageddon, you probably should be able to differentiate between your wife and your sister. It would be a nice Monty Python skit, but it's actually life, Calvin.
Yeah, it's not funny. I mean, I see a chap that can't decide which way to get off a stage every single time.
Has to be ushered.
And I'm wondering how he's running the free world.
When you see the video of him getting off Marine One, the helicopter on the South Lawn, and the Secret Service agent has to say, no, the doorway to the White House that you've been in now for a year and a half is that way, Mr. President, not that way. We have issues, to put it mildly.
Well, Seb, talk to us about what's in this book.
Yeah. So this, after I left the White House, I realized that it's not really about politics, as you've been talking with your guests and on your fabulous show. It's not about left and right. It's about those who love our society, love Christianity, understand why the West is the best civilization the world has ever seen, and those who detest it. And we are in this perverse situation where in America, for example, we are run by an elite that hates their own country. Open borders, 6 million illegal immigrants, critical race theory, the LGBTQ transgender agenda rammed down the throats of kindergarteners. In the state where I live, Calvin, if a pre-kindergarten school student misgenders their fellow pupil who decided today they're a girl as opposed to a boy, they can be suspended. If they misgender...
It's happening here.
It's insanity. This is a wake-up call, and in it I map how did we get here? How did the left become a bunch of radicals who hate their own society, and what it's going to take to fix it, and with an exclusive interview with my old boss, the president.
Oh, good. I like that the title is War for America's Soul, because this is not a culture war. This is a spiritual war.
It's not evil versus good.
Absolutely. Thank you so much. That was Dr. Sebastian Gorka, former White House advisor to Donald Trump. Thanks for your time today. Now, each week on the show, we like to end with our closing prayer, and this week we'll be hearing the Collect for the third Sunday after Trinity, which will be read by Rocco from St. Anthony's School for Boys.
O Lord, we beseech thee mercifully to hear us, and grant that we, to whom thou hast given an hearty desire to pray, may by thy mighty aid be defended and comforted in all dangers and adversities through Christ, for Jesus Christ our Lord. Amen.
Thank you, and God bless. Take care.
Hello there, very good evening. I'm Jonathan Vautry, here with your latest GB News weather forecast provided by the Met Office.
We have a rather humid and muggy night ahead of us. We've got low pressure to the northwest of the UK, high pressure to the southeast, but between that we are feeding in some really quite hot and humid conditions in that southwesterly airflow. So really going to feel quite sticky for a lot of us as we head throughout the night. Rather uncomfortable for sleeping. Most of us will stay dry though with some clear intervals. The Outer Hebrides just getting a glancing blow of some perhaps heavy showers, and far west of Northern Ireland seeing a little rain towards dawn on Sunday morning. But look at those temperatures holding up around 18 Celsius in a lot of towns and cities. Really quite a warm start to Sunday morning. A bright one for England, Wales and Scotland, but we're going to watch as this rain pushes in from the west, providing some heavy outbreaks for Northern Ireland and then eventually into parts of Western Scotland, Northern England and Northern Wales as well. Chances of some thunderstorms developing along this as well as ahead of it for Eastern England and Scotland could provide some torrential downpours of rain and hail. Ahead of that in the south, staying drier, but temperatures still up into the 30 degrees of Celsius. Really quite a hot, sticky day here. That rain then clears its way off through Sunday evening. Will take a little bit of time before eventually leaving parts of the Northern Isles. Behind that, though, our winds start changing to more of a westerly direction, and that's going to feed in some slightly fresher air. So temperatures a little bit lower come Sunday night and more comfortable for sleeping, around 12 to 14 degrees Celsius. The new working week then starts off on a bright and sunny note for many of us. Into the afternoon, we'll start to see some showers bubbling up, primarily across the northern half of the UK. Parts of southern Wales into central southern England will largely stay dry, with a lot of sunshine in between. There'll be some longer spells of rain as we head towards the middle part of the week, but still some sunshine in between those and temperatures around the low 20s.
First and foremost, I am a GB News fan, and I was before I was working here. Just love the fact that we're asking the questions that a lot of establishment media won't ask.
With a bit of a twist, we not only want to inform you, but we want to keep you entertained.
It's worth the drive because you get in and the team's all ready and waiting, they're itching to go, and it's a proper little family.
GB News is the People's Channel.
It's the audience that makes the programme sing.
We're giving our viewers and our listeners a voice. I see the thousands of your letters, tweets, emails, you name it, coming in.
Britain is broken. How on earth did we get into this mess? But more importantly, how do we get out of it?
The establishment had their chance. Now we're here to represent you.
It's time for something different. It's time for GB News. I'm very patriotic. I believe in Britain. Our best days lie ahead.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
Join us here on GB News.
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
I'm Andrew Doyle. Join me at 7 o'clock every Sunday night for Free Speech Nation, the show where I tackle the week's biggest stories in politics and current affairs with the help of my two comedian panellists and a variety of special guests.
Free Speech Nation, Sunday nights from 7 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Nightmare commute? Kick it up a gear with me, Patrick Christie's, at drive time, 3 till 6 p.m, Monday to Friday on GB News Radio. You can listen online and on DAB+, on the smart speaker app, and on the GB News app. And if you've got an Alexa, all you have to say is, Alexa, play GB News. We're also on TuneIn and the Radio Player apps. From the school run to rush hour, get revved up with me, Patrick Christie's, on GB News and GB News Radio.
What you get for breakfast is something that, if we do our jobs right, you will wake up to news that you didn't know the night before.
It's a conversation. It's not just me and Eamon.
We want to get to know you, and we want you to get to know us.
From 6, it's Breakfast with Eamon and Isabel.
Monday to Thursdays on GB News,
Britain's news channel.
Westminster is going around in ever-decreasing circles, followed by the media. Britain is broken. How on earth did we get into this mess? But more importantly, how do we get out of it? Join me at 7 p.m, Monday to Thursdays on Farage, here on GB News. We will have open, rational debate. We've got to work out how Britain moves forward from this. Join us here on GB News, the People's Channel. Britain is watching.
Every Sunday from 11, join Michael Portillo.
There will be topical discussion, looking at the week before and the week to come. So kick back and relax at 11 a.m. on Sundays on GB News with me, Michael Portillo. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
It's Saturday night and this is the Saturday Five. I'm Darren Grimes along with Albie Ammon-Corner, Emily Carver, Benjamin Butterworth and Leo Kirst. Tonight on the show, it's outrageous that we treat our veterans worse than illegal migrants.
Russia on the brink. Is it better than the devil we know?
Is the NHS actually making us fatter?